Hey guys, Youngblood with you for the 56th episode of the Inbox, starting off with a question from the Tyrell86 saying, do you think information running and stealing will be one of the most stable jobs? And have you heard anything about info running for the military? So as far as this being a stable job, I have a hard time, I guess as far as information stealing, I have a hard time envisioning that being a really stable job. I think it's something you could probably take on tasks, but when I think of stable jobs, I think of something that you're able to take on a mission, complete that mission, and then repeat and kind of do over and over again. I think you may be able to find missions or kind of requests or jobs to go out and steal information, but I think it's going to be a harder task because you not only have to track down the ship that you want to steal the information to, but that involves you not being detected, being able to hack, being able to grab the system, actually having that player be where they're supposed to be. There's a lot of other factors that go into it. You know, one of the ones we always go back to is cargo or mining. You know, it's you go somewhere, you get what you need, and you come back. Or, you know, those types of things are very simplistic. So as far as information stealing, I think it's not necessarily going to be stable from being able to complete it every time you go out to do it. Information running, on the other hand, just taking information, is almost a form of cargo hauling. Except instead of what you're taking is intangible. It's basically just, you know, information. So that, I think, is going to be a relatively stable career, especially as we talk about there not being faster than light communication, and there being these different systems. You know, we don't know how much communication is actually going to be going through jump points and how long that may take. It's definitely going to be safer, but it may also be faster to actually utilize another ship to take that information for you. We don't really know, but, you know, I think the information running piece is going to be more stable. As far as actually doing that for the military, we just flat out don't know at this point. I think the military would probably do that on their own. Information on its own is actually very, very valuable. It's very, very confidential, especially in a military setting. So hiring out some random non-military contractor to take that information on their behalf doesn't necessarily seem like something they'd be interested in doing. So my guess would be no. Volusion says, Bloody, can you tell me why everybody is talking about the cargo space when we don't have cargo yet? Yes, it's because cargo's coming. And right now everybody's trying to figure out what ships they want to have and what they want to purchase and how valuable ships are. And it doesn't matter if you're talking about a pure cargo hauler or if you're talking about some multi-purpose ship. The amount of cargo that a ship can haul is something that provides value to that ship. And when people are trying to determine what ships they want to have in their fleet, that value assessment is very important. So, you know, if somebody's talking about, I want a cheap fighter, you know, so they're saying, okay, well, I could get an Aurora LN or I could get an Avenger Titan. Well, they may look at that and say, okay, well, the Titan has internal cargo ability and is fighting able, so that may be a better purchase than something like the Aurora LN for somebody. So those are the types of conversations that people are having. Cargo is going to be a way to make money, whether that be your dedication or something that you use to do supplemental income. So that's kind of why people are actually discussing that today. Eye of Zashar, I said that probably pretty wrong. Hey, awesome content. How do you imagine the hostile ship boarding capture mechanics will work? I could see something like planting several explosives on the doors while doing EVA while the ship is immobilized, or simply do what FTL did and directly teleport your crew into the hostile ship. I'd love to know your opinion. Well, we don't have teleporting in the game, so I don't think that's going to happen. We've gotten a few bits of information. You know, today we're not going to be able to just, and I think the intended design is, we're not going to just be able to cut a hole into a random portion of the ship's, you know, hull. You know, you're going to need to use things like weak spots, and they've talked about this with stations, they've talked about it with ships, so there may be dedicated spots where you can cut a hole. You know, the doors are probably going to be able to be either blown off, or you could potentially use something like a data spike missile to hack it and force them open. You know, I think turrets are supposed to be weak spots as well, so you could potentially use your ship to blow the turret off the top and then enter through that section. There's going to be different ways to do it, and I think that depending on what type of ships you have available is going to determine how you do that. You know, if you bring along like a Warlock and you end up using the EMP to disable the ship, well, that may take off the security system, but it may also end up taking down the power to actually open the door. You know, whereas if you're using something like a data spike missile, it ends up latching onto the ship and you get control over the ship's computers, and then you can open up doors from that point. I think that's something that could happen. There's probably going to be more to this at some point. You know, we've seen that I did a video a long time ago, and I think I called it the Vandal boarding pod, if you want to see it. It really looks like it's got teeth on the front that are designed to cut through the hull of the ship. So it could happen if that's what it's for. They haven't confirmed that at all, so don't take that as, gospel. But it's going to be more about knowing the different ways that you can get in and then doing it. And then once you get in, you have to always worry about, okay, well, what's inside the ship? Well, you probably have crew that's going to try and defend the ship. Some ships are going to have internal defenses. They could potentially end up setting up ambushes. There's a whole lot more that's going to go into it. So we're waiting on those types of mechanics, and I think they're going to start coming in the 3.0, 3.1, 3.2, especially as 3.0 is selected to be a part of piracy. So I think we're going to get a little bit more information when that comes. Tim McPherson says, watched as many videos as I can, but I haven't seen this asked. If your ship is stolen from you and insurance replaces it, what happens to the original? Does the thief now possess it in his or her hangar? If so, would there be any rampant scanning of the system? You and I are friends. I steal your constellation. You get a new one, and now we both have one. Seems like a glaring hole they've probably addressed, but I haven't come across. This is an interesting topic because insurance fraud is something they're going to have to work through. Now, there should be some internal game things that are going to prevent, at least to a certain extent. For example, if you steal a ship from me, it's automatically going to be considered stolen. Then that ship is no longer able to be replaced for you. Now, if you steal mine, even though we're friends, I'm going to have mine replaced. But if you're in my constellation that you stole from me and it gets destroyed, insurance isn't going to cover you for the stolen ship that you took from me. So, from that perspective, it's only going to last until it dies. You're also going to be considered wanted in that ship. So when you fly into a spaceport, security's probably going to say, that's a stolen ship, let's jump them and try and capture them. Now, there's probably going to be things that you can do in game, and we've seen this talked about a little bit, where you could hire somebody to kind of put a false transponder on the ship, so when people are actually looking at you, it doesn't come across as stolen, it comes across as yours. So those types of things we know are supposed to be in the game to supplement the piracy gameplay perspective, but it's going to be a question of how CIG decides to kind of utilize having that piece in the game while also trying to make sure that the scamming isn't actually happening. They know it's an issue. I just don't think they have a plan yet, or at least one that they've vocalized as far as how they're going to prevent that from becoming a real problem. Honor Guard says, okay, got a dumb question for you here, but one I haven't really figured out yet. What are organizations in Star Citizen? Are they like guilds or clans you see in other guilds? And how do you know what groups to go with? Like some guilds in other games will be crappy, while others are good. Others can be cool players, while others would be elitist jerks. Just some info for a guy that would be appreciated. So, Star Citizen organizations are essentially guilds. You can be in multiple organizations, but you only have one primary organization. They are basically like clans, and we're starting to see more things that are going to make playing together a little bit easier. Things like friend lists. Spectrum is supposed to be communication. We're going to get some forum integration in there. So those types of things are coming. But when we start talking about how you decide who you want to go with, and I always suggest people to be a part of an organization, because outside of the fact that you have people that can help you, it's also fun just to play games like this with other people. But as far as what you can do to get into the one you want to be in, there's different things on the organization pages that you can look for, like we're very serious, or we're more casual. There's other things like we're interested in role play, we're not. There's also what the focus of the organization is. Like it could be a cargo organization, or a piracy organization, or a bounty hunting organization, and those are all listed out. So what I would try and do is I would start doing this early. And then you also see the size of the organization. Some people want to be in the biggest organizations possible. Other people want to be in a really tight-knit group and want it to be like 20 people. All of that information is displayed. Now, the one piece that you're not going to see is going to be, are these people elitist jerks, or are these people really cool? You might just want to kind of figure out how you want to play the game and go from there. So if you're a casual player and you see an organization is listed as hardcore role play, you're probably not going to have a good time there. So they may be really nice people, but they might come off as elitist jerks because that's not the type of gameplay you're looking for. So use the information that you have available, join in, see if they have forums or TeamSpeak or Mumble or Vent, different ways that you can get in and communicate with them now, because if it's not a good fit, you have plenty of time to find other organizations that would be a good fit. Unit 13 says, what sorts of scanning capabilities will capital ships have? Well, I need to enlist the help of a dedicated scanning vessel in order to maintain a decent level of situational awareness in my Polaris. So that's a really good question, and we don't really know. I think we can go ahead and assume that they're going to have above average scanning potential. There's lots of room on the ships for that sort of equipment to be there. There's scanning stations on the bridges of these ships. It makes sense for these, if they're going to take on like a command and control of a fleet type of role, that they would have really strong scanning capabilities. Now, keep in mind, most capital ships are going to be relatively slow, and you don't generally want a capital ship to be the first one entering an area. So from that perspective, having a dedicated scanning vessel like a Terrapin, for example, it would be a benefit because, if you're going to talk about, all right, we need to go into that asteroid field or we need to make this jump into the next system and it may be dangerous, you could send in a Terrapin and do some scanning instead of sending in like your Idris or your Javelin, where they may end up taking a pounding. Now, obviously, sending through a big capital ship isn't going to be at risk a whole lot, but if on the other side of that jump there tends to be an enemy organization fleet waiting, sending your flagship through alone could be a really bad plan. So I think if you're just talking about being able to see everything that's in the fight that you're immediately involved with, I think a command and control ship as far as like a capital ship would be pretty good. But if you're talking about supplementing that with a larger net or kind of paving the way or maybe even lagging behind to let you know if somebody's following you, I think in those situations having a dedicated scout would be a real benefit. And our last two questions today are patron questions, starting off with a Noakes PG. Says, hi STL, what are your thoughts on the Hornet Ghost in terms of value functionality? I have it and the Super Hornet, both with LTI, and I thought about upgrading them. In theory, the decision is easy, but I have hope that the Ghost will be useful down the road, but I may be able to melt or modify the Super Hornet for stealth also. Your thoughts are greatly appreciated. So between those two ships, I would absolutely keep the Super Hornet over the Ghost. The Super Hornet is a beast of a fighter. It's very durable. It's got a lot of weapons on it. It's pretty much one of the top fighters that you can actually get. The Ghost, on the other hand, while I like the Ghost, is essentially a weaker version with less guns and is carrying one less passenger, I guess you could say. Now, it's going to be stealthy, but they've said that the Ghost is basically a ship that was retrofitted into being able to be stealthy, as opposed to being a ship that was really designed with that in mind. So if you kind of extrapolate that, the Ghost is an F-7C. So if you can say that the F-7C can become stealthy by making changes, then you can probably do some of the same things to the Super Hornet. Now, one of the pieces that makes the Ghost stealthy is that it doesn't have the ball turret up top. Instead, it's got like that cooling platform there to lower your signature. So if you do the same thing to a Super Hornet, you're lowering some of the weapons that you can bring along. That being said, some of that void armor, I think you could probably slap on the side of your Super Hornet and still lower your signature some, but it's never going to be as low as the Ghost. So between those, I think you've got some redundancy. I wouldn't keep both of those. Instead, if you want to keep both of those in a fighter type role, I would take that Ghost and upgrade it to a Saber, because the Saber was purpose built with stealth in mind and is a better fighter than the Ghost is today. So that's what I would do with those. And our last question is from Sarah. What ships in the Pledge store would be best to buy in bulk to sell in commercial release to get a starting bonus in-game? So what Sarah's talking about here is primarily buying ships now that you then sell to vendors in the game to get credits in exchange, so then you have a nice starting bank. And I'm interested to see what CIG's impression of this sort of thing is, because I think there's other people that are planning to do it. But just getting to the real core of this question, I think the answer comes down to what ships now are cheap compared to what the value in the universe is going to be. So, on a larger scale, the Banu Merchantman is big. It carries more cargo than a whole sea. It's a dedicated blockade runner. It should be fast. It's got guns on it. You can use it as an in-game merchant, and it's $250. So $250 is a lot of money, but compared to what that ship's value is, I think that ship is going to skyrocket as in terms of how much it's going to cost in the verse. So as far as like those types of ships, I would say that's the type of thing you want to look for. So like the Merchantman would be a really good example. If you want to start talking about other ships, the Constellation may be a lot more money. The bigger the ship, the more it's going to cost in the universe. So I think those are the types of things you want to look for. So I would look at the different ships and say, all right, what do I think is going to jump in price significantly? I wouldn't do anything like Auroras or, like Avengers, anything in the under 100 category. If that's your real plan, I would say you probably want to look at maybe like Freelancers and up. But again, that becomes really expensive to do. And that comes with a huge caveat that CIG doesn't find a way to patch that and kind of prevent people from doing that, because we know they have goals in mind as far as limiting the amount of UEC you can have when you start in the universe. So there may be a situation where that doesn't become feasible and you spend a lot of money on ships you're not going to end up using. I don't know how they're going to balance that out. So that's it for this episode of The Inbox. As always, get your questions in if you have them. Otherwise, stay tuned for more content coming soon, and have yourselves a wonderful day. Take care.